Take a deep breath with me. God, we ask you to bless our reflections on your sacred scriptures. May our time spent together this morning be filled with grace and open our eyes and our hearts to love you and one another with more grace and compassion. Amen. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I love that a week after we get to celebrate the birthday of Jesus, the church plunks down this feast, the Solemnity of Mary, on January 1st. And it is fitting to me because, after all, we waited all of those weeks throughout Advent and for the coming of the Christ child, the infant Jesus. And Mary is the one who made it all possible. So it's fitting for me that those two celebrations should be tied together. And I thought, because it's a special day, that we could talk about the titles of Mary. And so I did a little bit of research and I found lists. There are tons of websites out there. And here are just a few. A lot of them, of course, are dedicated to her purity and her virginity. Holy Mary, Holy Mother of God, Mother of Christ, Mother most pure, Virgin most venerable. I love that word, venerable. Virgin most merciful. Mirror of justice. Isn't that beautiful? Mirror of justice. Cause of our joy. Mystical rose. And then, of course, all the queens. Queen of angels, Queen of the apostles, Queen of the martyrs, Queen of all saints, Queen of heaven, Queen of peace. Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of this, Our Lady of that. And what I realized is that there are two titles that I did not see on just about any list. And they're the two names for Mary that I love most. One is her human, everyday, ordinary name, and the other is her theological title. So I want to talk about both of those today. The name that Jesus would have called Mary is Ima, which is the Hebrew word for mommy. Just like we had in that second reading today, we heard that word Abba, which means dad or daddy. Jesus would have called Mary Ima. And I think that this was probably her most important role. And I think, we can bring a little bit of levity to the conversation about her as mother, because I'm not sure raising Jesus was a cup of tea. First of all, she was told before he was born, his name would be Jesus. The name Jesus means the one who saves. So no pressure. You're raising the one who's going to save all of the people. Then let's think about some of the stories we have from his life. At 12 years old, he runs away from his parents without telling them he's going back to the temple. When mom and dad find him and Mary says to him, son, don't you know how worried we were? What does he do? He sasses her. He says, don't you know I was about the Father's business? Years later, the wedding at Cana, Mary knows he's ready. She sees that his ministry needs to be born, and she says, son, they have no wine. And what does he do? He sasses her, and he says, woman, it is not yet my time. And then, of course, he goes off on his ministry and leaves his mother and attends to the people, which I'm sure she appreciated and loved. But I think it could not have been easy to raise this human being for whom she was responsible, setting him on the path of love, a love so pure and so sincere that he would rather die for love than compromise love. So being a mother to Jesus was an extraordinary act of compassion for us who would come to follow him. So how did she do it? How were her days possible? And this leads me to my favorite title for Mary, her theological title, Theotokos. Theo means God, and tokos means to carry or to bear. Mary is the God bearer. But I imagine that what she understood about bearing God into the world was that this was not a single moment in time. This wasn't about giving birth to Jesus. This was about bearing God into his life day after day, year after year, so that the presence of God, that connection between the Creator, the Redeemer, the Sanctifier, would always be known to him. For Mary, God-bearing was about relationship, not about a specific task. And so I think about, how do we bear God? Mary teaches us so many ways that we can follow. She models for us. But two things that occur to me that I want to lift up. One we hear about in the first reading this morning. Moses says to God, tell Aaron, here's how you are all to speak to one another. God blesses you. God shines light upon you. God walks in front of you and behind you. So the Israelites were given a posture of blessing. Mary was a good Jew, raised by good Jewish parents. So she had all of this legacy, the history of her ancestors, right? The second reading says, we are heirs to all that has come to us. So Mary would have lived a life blessing those all around her, saying to them, God's light shines upon you. God's face is always with you. And I would imagine she probably said that to Jesus every single day of his life, bearing God into the world through blessing. The other thing that we hear today in the gospel is that Mary reflected on things in her heart. Sometimes that word reflected is translated as pondered. And I always find it interesting because I don't know about you, but that word ponder for me, that's a head word, right? When I ponder things, I'm in my head, I'm looking at all the details. Excuse me. Mary pondered them in her heart. So what happens when we ponder things in our heart? Impatience turns to patience. Judgment turns to compassion. Frustration turns to mercy. When we ponder things in our heart, and I think it's so interesting that in two different gospel moments, in two different gospels, we are told that Mary pondered things in her heart. And we can take that into our lives. And when moments become frustrating or confusing, we don't know exactly how to step into the space where we are bearing God, bearing that presence of love, to pause and ponder things in our heart, and then perhaps choose to bless as Mary would have chosen to bless. Ima, mommy, mom, and of course, Theotokos, the God-bearer. The medieval mystic and theologian Meister Eckhart is quoted as having said, "We are all called to be bearers of God, for God is always needing to be born." And Mary models that for us throughout her life, bearing God, giving birth to the love that is the Spirit of God in every moment. May she walk with us this week and bless us, and let us always be willing to pray with her and pray to her, because she considers all of us her children, not just Jesus. May your week be blessed. Amen.